Hello and welcome to the channel. So behind me here is my '08 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited that I bought new back in 2008, and I've been doing some upgrades on it recently, including upgrading the lighting up here in the front end. Now I've installed some LED bulbs into the fog lamps here, and I installed a pair of these rigid off-road lights. Now this is a very similar setup to what I've done on my Power Wagon, which is sitting just right over there off camera. And it worked out really great on the Power Wagon, and it worked out great on the Jeep as well. And I thought that while I was working on upgrading the lighting, I might as well work on the rear end as well. And so that's what today's video is about. And I think I have a fairly unique idea for upgrading the lighting on the rear end. Now, in my opinion, the lighting output on the rear of a stock Jeep JK just isn't sufficient. It consists of a couple of these Sylvania 3157 bulbs, which consume about 27 watts of power, but only put out about 400 lumens each, which really isn't enough to light your way back here. So the first thing I did is I took these incandescent bulbs out of the reverse lamps, and I replaced them with a pair of these. These are LED bulbs from All the Lighting. These only consume about 8.5 watts of power, but they put out about 800 lumens, which is about twice what these old incandescent bulbs put out. And the light is a much whiter light, which also helps with visibility. Now, just adding these LED bulbs made a big difference back here, but I found that when it's really dark out and there's no ambient light at all, these still aren't really enough, and I really wanted a little bit of supplemental lighting back here. So I was looking for something that would help out with the lighting right here in the middle of the Jeep between the two existing reverse lights. And I came across a pair of these here. These are 4-inch LED pod lights from Nightlight. I found these on Amazon, and they were only $12 including shipping. They were on sale at the time, so I went ahead and grabbed a pair before I really figured out exactly where to mount them. I was not really expecting a lot for $12, but you know, when I received these, I was pretty happily impressed. They're pretty stout. They're actually made of all aluminum. There's no plastic with the exception of the lens. And for $12, I'm pretty happy. Now, they're made in China, and the quality is not at the same level as, say, the rigid lights I have mounted up front. But those are about $200 lights. So for 12 bucks, these are pretty decent. Now, according to the specs, these consume around 18 watts of power. And they put out about 1200 lumens, which I think should be just about perfect for this application. Now, the kit came with a pair of these lights plus the brackets, but I'm only planning to use the one light on the Jeep here. That's because I don't want so much light intensity that I end up blinding someone that may be behind me. But then I was faced with the dilemma of where to mount the light, and I have seen brackets that mount up above the spare tire, but these bars here, these house a carrier that I use when I go camping, so this area here is off limits. And I also have a little bracket that plugs into this little receiver that houses a fuel canister, so this is also off limits as well. I didn't really like the idea of drilling holes into the plastic bumper, and I did consider maybe mounting the light up underneath here like this, and that would be a possibility. But you know, this Jeep does a fair amount of off-roading, and having the light hanging down like this, I thought it might get hung up or even crushed. So while I was looking around trying to find a suitable location, I just happened to look back here behind the spare tire, and I noticed that the tire mount has a nice flat area there where I could potentially mount a light bracket, and it appeared that there may be enough room back there to house this 4-inch LED light. So as you can see here, not only is there enough room for this 4-inch LED light back behind the spare tire, I even have enough room that I can angle the light downward slightly so that I'm not blinding someone that may be parked behind me. Well, I think the solution should work with a lot of different lights, but it seems that the bracketry that came with this light is almost perfectly suited for it. As you can see, I was able to mount the light pretty high up here. That allowed me to angle the light down a little bit while also gaining enough elevation to clear this little V-notch here in the wheel. Now that brings up an interesting question, which is, what about other wheels? Would it work with other wheels? Well, I have a set of wheels that came off of a Jeep Sahara model, and those are very similar to this. The configuration is basically the same, so it should work with those. I think it would work with other stock Jeep JK wheels that use the 5-star configuration. So I think this is going to work out pretty well. Let's get started with the install. Now, one thing that attracted me to this light, besides the low cost and the moderate output, was the power rating. I really like to be able to wire this light in to the existing reverse lights, so when I put the Jeep in reverse, all three lights come on at the same time. I don't have to switch it on and off manually. And I'd really prefer to do that without adding any additional relay. So if you recall, I took out two of these incandescent bulbs from the reverse lights there, and each one of these consumes 27 watts. So I know that the circuitry that's delivering power to the reverse lights is capable of 27 watts. Now when I took this out, I replaced it with a 8.5 watt LED bulb in each side. So 27 watts minus 8.5, that's 18.5 watts. So that's the margin that I have for adding another light without having to add any additional relay. Now these lights are rated at 18 watts, so I'm right there at the threshold. So I'm going to go ahead and do a sanity check and make a power measurement just to make sure I'm not over that threshold. Now believe it or not, most automotive devices and accessories are rated at 12 volts rather than the 13.8 or 14 volts that an alternator will deliver. And I have a lawnmower battery here. I just so happen to have been replacing my mower battery, and it's just around 12 volts, maybe a little higher as it is. So I think this is going to be a pretty good test. So now I'm going to go ahead and measure the voltage with the light attached, so the loaded voltage. And yeah, we're getting really close to 12 volts. So we'll say about 11.94. So now I'm going to disconnect this and I'll go ahead and measure the current. And then I'll be able to calculate the power that this light actually consumes at 12 volts. Okay, so I have the meter set up for current measurement. So let's see what we get with the light attached. All right, so we're at 0.9 amps, which is a bit lower than I would expect. Let's see how much power that is. So 11.94 volts times 0.9 amps. That's only about 10.75 watts. So this light here is consuming less than its 18 watt rating, which is actually good news. That gives me plenty of margin. Just means I can safely attach this light here to the existing circuitry that powers the current reverse lights without adding any relays or any switches or anything like that. So that'll definitely simplify things. Okay, so I've removed the spare tire and I have the light sitting. This is just where it's going to be mounted. And as you can see, I have plenty of room to get my hand up under here in order to install that bracket. Now, as far as the wiring goes, you can see there's a hole here. This used to be a grommet like this one. The grommet's been removed, so I'm planning to route the wires from the tire carrier along here and into this hole. And then on the other side of the gate, I've removed this little plastic panel, and you can see there's a hole on this side, so I should be able to get the wire into here and along here and into this little sheath here, and then up here and down into this little grommet there. And from that little hole there, I should be able to connect to the reverse light right over here. Now these little guys are kind of interesting. It's basically just a zip tie attached to a pop rivet, and they're using these to hold the cable to the side of the Jeep. There's 3 of them, one here, one here, and one here. Now these are not really designed to be reusable, so I was going to just cut them off, but then I thought, you know, it'd be nicer if I was able to retain it so that this cable isn't flopping around. And what I noticed is on this side here, if you take a tiny little screwdriver like this, just like a zip tie, there's a little tab there, and if you bend it down, then this can be pulled right out. And so theoretically it should be reusable. So that's what I'm planning to do. Okay, so for the wiring, I'm going to be using this 18 gauge wire here, which is more than sufficient for this application. And because I'm not going to be using an external on-off switch for the light, I want a way to be able to quickly and easily disconnect it from the circuit in case I want to replace the light later or just disable it for any reason. So for that, I'm going to be using these connectors here. These are Anderson connectors. I've been using these for a bunch of years. They're great quality connectors, but they're not automotive style connectors, so there's no waterproof seal there. Now, they do, however, sell these little rubber sheaths, and the connectors will fit right inside there. You can actually use one on either side, and with a bit of self-fusing silicone tape, you can make these pretty darn waterproof. Now, the pins, these are silver plated, so they are corrosion resistant. And just for some added insurance, I'll put a bit of silicone grease on the pins before I connect it up. Now, I'm going to be soldering the connectors onto the wires. So to waterproof those, I'm going to be using this stuff here. This is marine grade heat shrink tubing. I bought this off of Amazon. They weren't very expensive. And you basically hit these with a heat gun or even a hairdryer, and they'll shrink up around the wire. They have an adhesive inside. That adhesive melts and it creates a waterproof seal. If you buy one of these LED kits from Nightlight, the kit will include a pair of these lights and a couple of brackets and nuts and bolts to install them. It does not include any of the wiring. Now that was fine with me because I have plenty of wires here in my shop. And if you'll notice here, I've added some plastic wire conduit to help protect the wire here along the outside of the gate and where it enters the gate here through this hole. Now it's time to go ahead and get this installed. And I need to cover up this hole here, but before that, let me tell you a quick story. So roughly 16 years ago, when the Jeep was still new, I installed this bracket here, which holds the carrier. And to get the bracket in place, I had to remove the rubber grommet that used to be covering up this hole. There's another one on the other side as well. The bracket couldn't be installed with those grommets in place. So what I did is I covered up the hole with this foam rubber stuff here. And I remember thinking 16 years ago that this would just be a temporary solution, that I'd have to figure out something more permanent for next time. But just a couple of days ago, I pulled this off and it's still in pretty good shape. It never really fully deteriorated. The adhesive held on all this time, 16 years. And in fact, here's the other one on the other side. This is the original 16-year-old piece of foam rubber still there. Now there's a little plastic coating which you can take off, but I just left it on, and maybe that helped to protect it a little bit, I don't know. But I was pretty amazed at that, and I looked in my stash, and lo and behold, I still have what looks to be the original roll. I think this is exactly the same stuff. I'm almost out of it, but I think this is the same stuff, so I'm going to use this again, and I think all I need to do is I'll just cut a little hole in the center in order to feed the wire, and I'll go ahead and patch that hole with the foam rubber, and I'm hoping that it'll last me another 16 years. That's a really tight fit, but I think that's what I want to make sure that no water or dust or debris gets through there. I think this is going to work. These old metal coat hangers still come in handy for jobs like this. I recently upgraded the backup camera there, and I wired it into the left side reverse light. Now, so I'm not drawing additional current from that left side, I'm going to go ahead and wire in the new LED light up here onto the right side reverse light. And if you notice here, the reverse light's on the bottom. So you want to look at this guy here. If you're following along at home, this is the ground, the black wire, and this wire here is the positive. It's white and green, white with a green stripe. But it comes up here through this connector, and on the other side of the connector, they change colors on you. So this is white with a gray stripe. That's the positive side, and then the black, of course, is still ground. So that goes up into the Jeep. So let's take a look at the other side. Okay, so here on the other side, on the interior of the Jeep, I pulled the carpet back, and up through this grommet are the wires from the reverse light. This top one here is the ground, that black wire. And then below it is white with the gray stripes. That should be my positive side from the reverse light. So I have my new LED wires here. So that will tie in here and here. And then the wire will run along here and here. And you can see it's sitting there. And into the little sheath here, I have it zip tied to the body. And then On this side I have corrugation and a zip tied along here. So then it goes into this little hole and out the other side and up to the tire carrier, and I'll install the light right there where that red square is. Now the way I'm planning to connect my wires is a little bit controversial to me, because I usually like to solder my wires, especially if the connection point's on the outside of the vehicle where corrosion may be of a concern, or if I'm connecting a higher power device where inline resistance may be of a concern. But in this case, I'm going to be connecting the wires on the inside of the Jeep, so they're not going to be subject to much moisture. Corrosion shouldn't be of a concern, and I prefer to connect them on the inside for that reason. But in this case, I really don't have a lot of room for a soldering iron back here. And that LED light only draws about 1 amp of current or less, so power is not really much of a concern there either. So in this case, it actually makes sense for me to use these little connectors here. I don't love to use these because the connection point is not a super solid one, and like I said, they can be corrosion prone. But if you've never seen these, the way these work is you just slide them over an existing wire, and then you put a new wire just alongside of it, and then you clamp this top piece down. That pushes this blade down into the wires, and it actually cuts into the insulation and makes a connection point between the two wires. So they're pretty easy to use. Again, I prefer soldering, but in this case, these are going to work okay. And I'm going to go ahead and seal them really well with some self-fusing silicone tape just for some added protection. Sometimes it's easier to use some pliers. There we go. So that should be connected to the ground wire here. This is the ground wire on the reverse light, the Jeep reverse light, and then this is the ground wire that's going to go to the LED light here. And then you just close this top, and I'll do the same with the positive side, and then I'll wrap them really well. Okay, so I wrapped the two connectors inside this self-fusing silicone tape here. This is nice and tight, so no moisture is going to get inside, and they shouldn't rattle loose. And then I've just put some regular electrical tape around the corrugations here as it was when I started. And now I have the right reverse light, and there's the center reverse light, and then the left reverse light. So everything is working now. I just need to button things up, and I still need to drill a hole and mount the light up here. Okay, so here's the final product, and I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. It looks like it would be really tight in there, but there's actually plenty of clearance to the wheel, and I can very easily get my hand in there or around this side to adjust the angle of the light. And if I want access to the cable, all I need to do is open the tailgate, and I have very easy access from the opposite side. Well, the fog and the rain started to roll in, and my nighttime video quality isn't that great, but hopefully it was good enough for you to tell that taking out the old 3157 incandescent bulbs from the backup lamps here and replacing those with the all LED lights helped a lot with the nighttime visibility. And then adding the 4-inch LED pod light from Nightlight, that helped quite a bit as well. But without being so bright that it ends up potentially blinding someone that may be behind me. So I'm pretty happy overall with the way things worked out, and I really didn't pay much for this install. You know, the LED pod lights were only $12 and change for a pair, and then the LED bulbs that I replaced there, those are only about $17 for the pair. So $29 plus whatever I have in wiring and the connectors and such. It was a pretty cheap install overall, and I'm pretty happy with it. So hopefully this was informative for others, and we'll see you next time.